told everyone I couldn't satisfy her. Now she's begging the man she threw away. I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts, but here I am at 2 in the morning, can't sleep, and my ex-wife has sent me 47 text messages in the past 3 days. 47. I counted. My name's David. I'm 34, and 6 months ago, my wife of 7 years told our entire friend group at a dinner party that I couldn't satisfy her in bed. Those were her exact words. She said it while I was sitting right there. Then she laughed like it was the funniest joke she'd ever told. I need to give you some context because this whole situation is bizarre, and I'm still processing it. My ex-wife's name is Rachel. We met when I was 25 and she was 23. I was working as a software engineer at a mid-sized company, nothing fancy, and she was finishing up her master's degree in communications. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue and hit it off immediately. Rachel was fun. That's what attracted me to her initially. She was spontaneous and adventurous and always wanted to try new things. I'm more reserved, more of a planner. I like routine and stability. We balanced each other out, or at least that's what I thought for the first 5 years of our relationship. We got married after dating for 2 years. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. Exactly what I wanted. Rachel had wanted something bigger, but she agreed to keep it intimate. Looking back, that should have been my first sign that we wanted fundamentally different things. The first few years of marriage were good. Normal, I guess. We both worked, came home tired, made dinner together, watched TV, went to bed. Weekends we'd go hiking or try new restaurants or visit her parents. It wasn't exciting, but it was comfortable, and I thought that's what marriage was supposed to be. Rachel started getting restless around year 4. She'd make comments about how boring our life was, how we never did anything spontaneous anymore, how all we did was work and sleep. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone complains about routine sometimes, right? But then she started going out more without me. Girls' nights, she called them. She'd go to bars with her work friends and come home late, sometimes after I was already asleep. I didn't mind at first because I'm not big on the club scene anyway, and I figured she needed to blow off steam. Then the comments about our intimate life started. Little things at first. She'd say I was too predictable in bed, that we always did the same things, that I wasn't adventurous enough. I tried to be more spontaneous, tried to initiate more, tried different things, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. She always had some complaint. About a year ago, her criticism got more frequent and more harsh. She started comparing me to guys in movies or celebrities. She'd make jokes about how I was boring, even in the bedroom. At first, she'd apologize after and say she was just kidding around. But the jokes became meaner over time. I suggested we try counseling. She shot that down immediately, said there was nothing wrong with our marriage, I just needed to be more exciting. She bought books about spicing up your love life and would leave them on my nightstand like homework assignments. It was humiliating. Her friends started treating me differently too. When we'd all hang out, they'd make these knowing looks at each other when Rachel made comments about our relationship. I felt like I was the butt of some joke I wasn't in on. The dinner party happened 6 months ago. It was at our house, which makes it even worse. Rachel had invited 3 couples over, all friends of ours from college and grad school, people I'd known for nearly a decade. We were having a nice time, drinking wine, eating the food I'd spent all afternoon preparing because I actually enjoy cooking. We were all sitting around the dining room table, and someone made a joke about their own relationship, something lighthearted about forgetting an anniversary. Everyone laughed, and then people started sharing funny stories about relationship mishaps. It was all in good fun. Then Rachel, who was on her 3rd glass of wine, decided to share her story. She said, and I quote, that the biggest disappointment in her marriage was that I couldn't satisfy her sexually. She said it loudly enough that everyone stopped talking and stared. Then she laughed and said she was just being honest. The table went completely silent. I felt my face get hot. I couldn't look at anyone. One of our friends, Mike, tried to change the subject, but Rachel kept going. She said I was boring in bed, that I had no creativity, that being intimate with me was like a scheduled appointment. She said she'd tried to help me improve, but I was a lost cause. I stood up from the table and went to our bedroom. I could hear everyone trying to awkwardly move past what had just happened. Someone asked Rachel if she was okay, if she'd had too much to drink. She said she was fine, and that everyone was being too sensitive. The party broke up pretty quickly after that. I heard people saying goodbye and leaving. Then Rachel came into the bedroom and got angry at me. She said I'd ruined the party by being dramatic and walking away. She said she was just joking around and I needed to learn to take a joke. I told her that humiliating me in front of our friends wasn't a joke. She rolled her eyes and said I was being too sensitive. Then she said maybe if I wasn't so insecure about my performance in bed, I wouldn't be so upset about her being honest. That's when something broke in me. I'd spent years trying to be enough for her, trying to be more exciting, trying to change myself to meet her constantly shifting expectations. And it was never going to be enough. She didn't respect me, and she never would. I told her I wanted a divorce. She laughed and said I was being ridiculous. I repeated myself. I said I wanted a divorce, and I wanted her to move out. She got angry then and said I couldn't just kick her out of her own house. I reminded her that the house was in my name because I'd bought it before we got married and she'd never contributed to the mortgage. We fought for hours that night. She alternated between crying and yelling at me. She said I was throwing away our marriage over nothing. She said every couple had problems and I was being childish. She said she'd apologize to our friends if that's what I wanted. I said it wasn't about the apology. It was about years of disrespect and criticism and her treating me like I was some project she could fix if she just complained enough. It was about her valuing the opinion of her friends and the excitement of going out over building an actual partnership with me. She ended up sleeping in the guest room that night. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. Rachel didn't believe I was serious until the divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. Then she panicked. She suddenly wanted to go to counseling. She said she'd been going through something and taking it out on me unfairly. She promised she'd change, that she'd never humiliate me like that again, that she'd be more respectful. But it was too late. You can't unring that bell. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. It was relatively straightforward since we didn't have kids and kept our finances mostly separate. The house was mine. We split our shared savings account. She took her car, I kept mine. Done. Our friend group fractured. Most people sided with me after what happened at the dinner party. A few tried to stay neutral, but it was awkward. Rachel ended up hanging out with a different crowd, people from her work mostly. For the first few months after the divorce was finalized, I didn't hear from her at all. I focused on work, started going to the gym regularly, reconnected with some old friends I'd lost touch with. I started seeing a therapist to work through everything. Slowly, I started feeling like myself again. Then about 3 months ago, Rachel started liking my Instagram posts. Just random likes on photos I'd post of hiking trips or dinners with friends. I didn't think much of it at first. Then she started commenting. Nothing crazy, just stuff like, looks fun or nice photo. I didn't respond. 2 months ago, she sent me a text. She said she hoped I was doing well and that she'd been thinking about me. I didn't respond to that either. Then she started texting more frequently, asking how I was, saying she missed talking to me, reminiscing about good times we'd had together. I finally responded and told her I appreciated her reaching out, but I'd moved on and didn't think it was healthy for us to be in contact. She didn't take that well. She called me and left a voicemail crying, saying she'd made a mistake, that she'd been awful to me and she knew it now. That was a month ago. Since then, the messages have escalated. She's texted me probably 100 times total. She said she wants another chance, that she went to therapy and worked on herself, that she realizes now how good I was to her. She's apologized for the dinner party incident specifically, said it was the worst thing she's ever done, and she thinks about it constantly. Last week, she showed up at my house. I didn't answer the door, but I watched through the window as she stood on my porch for 20 minutes crying. My neighbor asked if everything was okay and if she should call someone. I told her it was fine, just my ex-wife having a hard time with the divorce. 3 days ago, Rachel sent me a long email, multiple paragraphs about how she threw away the best thing in her life, how I was a great husband and she was too stupid to see it, how she's dated other people since the divorce, and they all made her realize how special what we had was. She said she still loves me and wants to try again. The thing is, I don't feel anything when I read her messages. No anger, no sadness, no temptation to respond. I just feel nothing. The man she humiliated at that dinner party doesn't exist anymore. I've spent 6 months rebuilding my self-esteem and my life, and I have no interest in going backward. But she won't stop. 47 texts in 3 days. Emails, showing up at my house. I haven't blocked her number because part of me thinks I should keep a record in case I need a restraining order, but I'm getting close to that point. My friends say I should just block her and move on completely. My therapist says I need to set a firm boundary and stop engaging at all, even by watching her through the window or reading her messages. They're probably both right. But I'm also kind of amazed at how the tables have turned. 6 months ago, she was laughing at me in front of our friends. Now she's crying on my porch, begging for another chance. It's not that I want revenge or want to see her suffer. I just want her to leave me alone so I can keep building this new life I've started. Has anyone dealt with something similar? How did you get an ex to stop contacting you without having to get courts involved? And am I wrong for feeling absolutely nothing when she says she still loves me? Update. It's been 2 weeks since I made that post and things have gotten weirder. I appreciate everyone who commented with advice. A lot of you told me to block Rachel and stop reading her messages, and you were right. I should have done that immediately, but I didn't, and now I'm dealing with the consequences of that choice. So after I made that post, Rachel's text continued, but the tone changed. She wasn't just apologizing anymore. She started getting angry. She'd text me paragraphs about how I was being cruel by ignoring her, how she deserved at least a conversation after 7 years of marriage, how I was a coward for not facing her. Then she'd follow those angry texts with apologetic ones. She'd say she didn't mean it, that she was just hurt and frustrated, that she loved me and wanted to talk things through. It was this constant back and forth between anger and desperation. I still didn't respond to any of it. My therapist was proud of me for maintaining that boundary. She said Rachel was trying to get any reaction from me, positive or negative, and I was doing the right thing by giving her nothing. Then Rachel started showing up at places I go regularly. First it was the gym. I work out at the same place every Tuesday and Thursday morning before work. I walked in last Tuesday, and she was there on a treadmill facing the entrance. When I saw her, I turned around and left immediately. She followed me to the parking lot calling my name. I got in my car and drove away without acknowledging her. The next day, she was at the coffee shop I stop at every morning. Same thing. She tried to approach me and I left without getting my coffee. She followed me outside and said we needed to talk. I kept walking to my car. She actually grabbed my arm and I had to pull away and tell her not to touch me. That's when I knew this was going beyond just annoying texts and emails. She was actively tracking my movements and inserting herself into my routine. I started going to a different gym and a different coffee shop. I changed up my schedule to be less predictable. Friday night, I went to dinner with some friends at a restaurant downtown. We were having a good time, celebrating my friend Brian's promotion at work. Halfway through dinner, I looked up and Rachel was sitting at the bar staring at our table, just sitting there watching me. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I texted Brian and told him Rachel was there and I needed to leave. He understood and we all left together. As we were walking out, Rachel tried to approach me again. Brian stepped between us and told her she needed to stop. She started crying and saying I was turning all our friends against her. One of the other guys we were with, Mark, pulled out his phone and started recording. He told Rachel she needed to leave me alone or we'd have to involve the police. She looked at the camera and then at me and said she just wanted to talk, that she had a right to talk to her husband. I corrected her and said, ex-husband. She broke down crying and then she left the restaurant. That video Mark took was good to have because things got worse over the weekend. Saturday morning I was doing yard work. I live in a quiet neighborhood, houses spread out a bit, lots of privacy. I was mowing the front lawn with headphones in. When I finished and turned off the mower, I saw Rachel sitting in her car across the street just watching my house. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of her car with her visible in the driver's seat. Then I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation, that my ex-wife was harassing me and now sitting outside my house. They sent an officer over. By the time the cop arrived, Rachel had gotten out of her car and was standing on my front lawn. She was trying to explain to me that she'd driven by coincidentally and just wanted to check on the house since she used to live here. It was obviously not true since she'd been parked there watching me work. The police officer was professional. He asked Rachel to explain what she was doing there. She started crying and said she just missed me and wanted to see if we could talk. He asked if I wanted her to leave and I said yes. He told her she needed to go and that if she came back to my property or continued following me around, I could file for a restraining order. Rachel looked at me like I'd betrayed her. She said she couldn't believe I'd called the cops on her, that she was just trying to save our marriage. I didn't respond. The officer walked her to her car and watched her drive away. Then he gave me his card and told me to call if she showed up again, or if I wanted to move forward with a restraining order. After he left, I went inside and finally blocked Rachel's number. I also blocked her on all social media. I should have done it months ago, but some part of me thought maybe she'd eventually give up on her own. Now I realized she wasn't going to stop unless I forced her to. I spent the rest of the weekend at home feeling anxious every time a car drove down my street. I kept checking the windows to see if she was out there. It's a horrible feeling, not feeling safe in your own house. Sunday evening, my doorbell camera caught Rachel walking up to my porch and leaving something by the door. I didn't go outside to check what it was until the next morning. It was a box with some of my things she'd apparently kept after the divorce. My college hoodie, a book I'd been looking for, some photos of us. There was a note on top that said she thought I might want these back and that she hoped I was happy. The note felt manipulative to me, like she was trying to seem reasonable and kind while simultaneously violating the boundary the police officer had just set. I took photos of everything, including the timestamp from my doorbell camera, showing her at my house after being told to stay away. Monday, I contacted a lawyer about getting a restraining order. I showed him all the texts and emails from before I blocked her, the video from the restaurant, the photos of her sitting outside my house, and the doorbell footage. He said I had more than enough for a temporary restraining order and possibly a permanent one, depending on if she violated the temporary order. We filed the paperwork yesterday. Rachel should be served with it sometime this week. I feel guilty about it even though I know I shouldn't. My therapist reminded me that I've given Rachel multiple chances to respect my boundaries and she's chosen not to. This is a consequence of her actions, not mine. My friends have been supportive. Brian and Mark both offered to stay at my place for a few days if I felt unsafe. I told them I was okay, but I appreciated the offer. Honestly, I'm just exhausted. I thought the divorce would be the end of this chapter of my life, but apparently Rachel had other plans. The ironic thing is that if she just left me alone after the divorce, I probably would have eventually been able to remember some of the good parts of our relationship. But now when I think about Rachel, all I can think about is her humiliating me at that dinner party and then stalking me for months when I tried to move on with my life. I'll update once the restraining order is served and I see how she reacts. Hopefully this will finally make her understand that it's over and she needs to move on too. Update. The restraining order was served 4 days ago and Rachel's response has been both predictable and somehow still surprising. I'm writing this update because things have escalated in a different direction and I want to document everything. When Rachel was served with the temporary restraining order, she apparently had a complete meltdown. I know this because her sister called me. We'd always gotten along decently when I was married to Rachel, and she was apologetic about reaching out. But she said she felt I should know what was happening. According to her sister, Rachel locked herself in her apartment for 2 days crying. She called out of work. She wasn't eating. Her sister went over to check on her, and Rachel was reading and rereading the restraining order while sobbing. She kept saying she couldn't believe I'd done this to her, that I was the love of her life, and now I'd legally banned her from being near me. Her sister tried to be sympathetic, but also told Rachel that she'd brought this on herself, that showing up at my house and my gym and following me around was not normal behavior, and of course I'd gotten a restraining order. Rachel apparently didn't take that well and asked her sister to leave. I appreciated the heads up, but I also told Rachel's sister that I couldn't be her source of information about Rachel anymore, that I was trying to move on and Rachel's emotional state wasn't my responsibility. She understood and said she wouldn't contact me again unless it was an emergency. That was 3 days ago. Yesterday, I found out what Rachel did next, and honestly, I'm still processing it. She posted on Facebook a long, detailed post about our relationship, the divorce, and the restraining order. She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive ex-husband who couldn't handle that she'd been honest about problems in our marriage. She said I was cruel and petty, and that getting a restraining order was just my way of punishing her for telling the truth. She didn't mention the dinner party. She didn't mention humiliating me in front of our friends. She didn't mention showing up at my house multiple times or following me around town. She made it sound like she gently suggested we work on our intimacy issues, and I'd exploded and divorced her out of nowhere. Multiple mutual friends sent me screenshots. Some people who didn't know the full story commented on her post with supportive messages about how sorry they were she was going through this. A few people who'd been at that dinner party commented, correcting the narrative. Mike, who tried to change the subject that night, wrote a comment explaining what had actually happened and why people needed to hear both sides before judging. Rachel deleted those comments and blocked the people who made them. I didn't respond to her post. I didn't comment or make my own post telling my side. My lawyer specifically told me not to engage on social media at all because it could complicate the restraining order process. So I just let her have her public meltdown and hoped people who actually knew us would see through it. Then this morning, something else happened. I got an email from Rachel's work account. The restraining order specifically prohibits her from contacting me, but apparently she thought using her work email instead of her personal email was a loophole. The email was long. She apologized for the Facebook post and said she was just hurt and not thinking clearly. She said she knew she'd messed up by following me around and that the restraining order was fair. But then she said she'd done all this work on herself in therapy, and she'd realized that she sabotaged our marriage because she was afraid of being truly happy. She said she'd been diagnosed with anxiety and depression and was on medication now. She said her therapist helped her understand that she'd pushed me away because she didn't feel worthy of my love. She said the dinner party incident was her at her absolute worst, and she'd been carrying shame about it every day since. Then she asked if we could have one conversation, just one, so she could apologize properly and get closure. She said she'd respect whatever I said after that and leave me alone forever. I immediately forwarded the email to my lawyer. He said this was a clear violation of the restraining order and we could use it to strengthen our case for a permanent order. He sent a formal letter to Rachel's workplace explaining that she'd used her work email to contact me in violation of a restraining order and that they needed to ensure it didn't happen again. I haven't heard anything since then, but I imagine Rachel's employer was not happy to get that letter. Using company resources to violate a legal order is a good way to get fired. Part of me feels bad. I don't want Rachel to lose her job. I don't want her to be depressed or struggling with her mental health. But another part of me, the part that my therapist has been working with me to strengthen, knows that none of this is my fault or my responsibility. Rachel made choices. She chose to humiliate me publicly. She chose to ignore my requests to be left alone. She chose to stalk me after I made it clear the relationship was over. She chose to violate a restraining order. These are all her choices and the consequences are hers to deal with. My therapist asked me yesterday if I felt any temptation to respond to Rachel's email or to give her the closure conversation she's asking for. I told her honestly that I don't. The man Rachel was married to, the one who would have bent over backward to make her happy even when she was treating him terribly, that person doesn't exist anymore. I've spent 6 months rebuilding my sense of self-worth. I've reconnected with hobbies I'd abandoned because Rachel thought they were boring. I've strengthened friendships that had faded because I was so focused on trying to fix my marriage. I've started dating again, nothing serious yet, but I've been on a few dates with women who treat me with basic respect and kindness. My life is better without Rachel in it. That's the simple truth. And no amount of apologies or promises to change or claims that she's worked on herself in therapy will change the fundamental fact that she doesn't respect me and probably never will. The hearing for the permanent restraining order is in 2 weeks. My lawyer is confident we'll get it based on the documented harassment and the violation of the temporary order. After that, hopefully, this will finally be over. I'm not angry at Rachel anymore. I'm not bitter or vengeful. I just want her to leave me alone so I can keep living this new life I've built. Is that really too much to ask? Update. Final update. The hearing was last week, and I got the permanent restraining order. Rachel didn't even show up to contest it, which honestly surprised me. I thought she'd at least try to tell her side of the story or plead her case. But her lawyer was there and entered a no-contest plea on her behalf. The judge granted a 3-year restraining order. Rachel has to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. She can't contact me directly or indirectly through other people. If she violates it, she can be arrested. After the hearing, Rachel's lawyer approached my lawyer in the hallway. He said Rachel wanted me to know she was sorry and that she was going to respect the order and leave me alone. He also said, and this is the part that actually made me feel something, that Rachel had checked herself into an inpatient mental health facility the day after she violated the restraining order with that work email. Apparently, after her employer confronted her about using company resources to contact me, she had some kind of breakdown. Her sister found her in her apartment in bad shape and took her to the hospital. She's been in treatment for the past week and a half and plans to stay for at least another month. I'm not going to lie, hearing that made me feel complicated. Not guilt exactly, and definitely not a desire to reach out or help. More like sadness that it got to this point. Rachel and I had good years together before everything fell apart. She wasn't always the person who humiliated me at a dinner party or stalked me after the divorce. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't want to see it. My therapist and I talked about it in our session yesterday. She reminded me that Rachel's mental health crisis, while unfortunate, is not my responsibility and was not caused by me setting healthy boundaries. Rachel's issues existed long before I filed for divorce. The dinner party incident, the constant criticism of me, the need for external validation, those were all symptoms of whatever she's dealing with internally. Me getting a restraining order didn't cause her breakdown. Me refusing to let her violate my boundaries didn't cause her breakdown. Her own actions and her inability to cope with the consequences of those actions, that's what led to where she is now. I hope Rachel gets the help she needs. I genuinely do. But I also know that I can't be part of her healing process. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their behavior and figure their life out without you. Since the restraining order was finalized, my life has been peaceful. I haven't gotten any messages or emails. Nobody's shown up at my house or followed me around. I can go to my regular gym and coffee shop again without constantly looking over my shoulder. I've been dating someone for about a month now. Her name's Sarah, and she's a teacher at the elementary school near my office. We met at a bookstore when we both reached for the same book. I know that sounds like something from a movie, but it actually happened. We started talking, and I asked if she wanted to get coffee sometime, and she said yes. Sarah knows I'm divorced, but she doesn't know all the details yet. At some point, I'll need to tell her about Rachel and the restraining order, especially since it could affect our relationship if Rachel ever violates it and there's drama. But for now, I'm just enjoying getting to know someone who treats me kindly and seems genuinely interested in who I am as a person. My friends have noticed the change in me too. Brian said last week that I seem lighter, like I'm not carrying around this heavy weight anymore. He's right. For years, I was trying so hard to be enough for Rachel, to meet her constantly changing expectations, to make her happy. It was exhausting, and it was slowly destroying my sense of self. Now I'm just living my life. I go to work, and I'm good at my job. I spend time with friends and actually enjoy it instead of worrying about what Rachel will say about how I spent my time. I pursue hobbies that interest me without wondering if they're exciting enough. I date people who appreciate me instead of constantly criticizing me. It sounds simple, but it's revolutionary for me. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd given up trying to be who Rachel wanted me to be. Someone in the comments on my original post asked if I'd ever consider taking Rachel back if she really changed and proved she'd worked on herself. The answer is no. Even if she spent years in therapy and became a completely different person, I wouldn't go back. Not because I'm holding a grudge or trying to punish her, but because I've seen who she's capable of being when she's not happy with me. And I never want to be in a relationship with someone who handles their unhappiness by tearing me down publicly. I deserve better than that. Everyone deserves better than that. If you're reading this and you're in a relationship where your partner criticizes you constantly or humiliates you in front of others or makes you feel like you're never good enough, please hear me when I say that it doesn't get better. They don't suddenly wake up one day and realize they've been treating you badly. The pattern just continues until either you break or you leave. I'm glad I left. I'm glad I stood up for myself at that dinner party and refused to accept being treated that way anymore. I'm glad I got the restraining order when Rachel couldn't respect my boundaries after the divorce. I'm glad I chose myself for once instead of trying to save a relationship with someone who didn't value me. This is my last update because this chapter of my life is finally closed. Rachel is getting help. I have legal protection in place. I'm building a new life that makes me happy. There's nothing left to say. To everyone who commented with support and advice, thank you. It helped more than you know to hear from people who'd been through similar situations and come out the other side. And to anyone currently going through something like this, it does get better. You just have to be brave enough to walk away and start over. Take care of yourselves.